Hello everyone and welcome to today's Chrissy B Show, and we are the program that loves to look after your mental health and well-being. Now, have you ever heard these words from your parents? Why didn't you do better? I'm really disappointed in you. It's good, but it's not good enough. How did those words make you feel? This Mental Health Monday, we're talking about parents and how their expectations can have a detrimental effect on us throughout our life. Shedding some light on this subject is our resident psychologist, Dr. Audrey Tang, and we also hear from author Jonathan Ford, who sunk into a deep depression due to his perfectionism, partly brought on by his mother's expectations. Our resident newsreader Helena Chard is on hand to tell you all the positive things happening in the world today in Behind the Fame, and we take you to Salad Pride to learn about how to make a nutritious, delicious salad. At the end of the show, I'll also be sharing my own tips on how to live life past expectations. According to news media outlet Quartz, researchers found that high parental aspirations can lead to increased academic achievement, but only when those expectations are realistic and not too overreaching. When parents set goals which overly exceeded a child's ability and expectations, that child's achievement, as well as their self-esteem and mental health, decreased substantially. The problem is no better for parents that consistently overestimate the expectations of high achievers, as one study reported by The Independent found. High achievers were 4 times more likely to develop a mental illness than those who achieved average grades. High achievers are also more likely to be perfectionists and are more likely to have an inability to accept failure. So interesting stuff, but what do you guys think about this? Dr. Deborah Cole gives it to us straight: forget perfectionism, don't procrastinate. Jordan Rosenfeld agrees. She says, if you could write perfect work all the time, how would that shape you or encourage you to grow? Dragons G's quotes Mark David Gerson saying, perfection isn't possible. Strive for excellence and abandon perfectionism. Psychology tweets say, psychology says that children of strict parents tend to be sneakier. Dom Dom says, living with strict parents is so hard. And here are Sheena's thoughts on the matter. Perfectionism is exhausting. It can steal your time, your energy, your joy, your life. Some interesting thoughts there. Now, before we delve into the implications our parents' expectations can have on us, here's our very own Helena Chard with this week's Behind the Fame. Welcome to the show, Helena.
Thank you, Chrissy.
So what's in Behind the Fame news this week?
Behind the Fame, gosh, lots and lots of things. I'm going to start off with the addiction charity, Addiction, it's called, which is quite clever. They've been praising Ant McPartlin, as we know, obviously with his drugs and drink addiction, for talking about it so honestly and openly, and how fantastic it's been and inspiring for everybody. As we all know, it's to do with the stigma and everything, but they've been talking about it. Kate Middleton, Prince William, Prince Harry, they sent him a letter as well because he talked about his year-long fight with depression and various things. So again, very inspiring. I've been reading the whole story, which is quite amazing. And also from his point of view, Ant's been talking about how his NHS doctor has really been fantastic, and he's really saved him because he went private, and obviously that's where it all started, and also given the wrong medication all the time, which is quite a well-known thing, and he's very inspiring. Professor David Dehan, I think his name is. So it's really nice that everyone's been saying how great everybody is, and it's been really good. Moving on to Princess Diana, I know everyone's been talking about her now for months, and obviously we've passed the date of, everything we've been keeping her memory going, but the fascination about her, and
it doesn't die, does it?
It just doesn't. It continues, but it's just, for me, I just like hearing all the little stories from people that met her, which I think is really good fun. And there's one young lady, Gemma Quinn, who was paralysed when she was 7. And she was an inspiration to various people, even Christopher Reeve she wrote letters to, etc. She's older now, but Princess Diana was completely inspired by her and her courageous behaviour from such a young age. And she actually visited her in Liverpool, but she was just saying it was the best day. This is Gemma. It was the best day of her life. That they just formed such a great bond, and she made her feel like she could achieve anything. So she did do a lot of things, like working for charity and things, and it was such a special bond. And that's just a well-known thing that everyone talks about with Princess Diana. So it's always good to.
It wasn't just for the cameras.
It wasn't,
because a lot of people, unfortunately, they do things just for the PR side of things.
There's always people have different thoughts, but I think she genuinely had something very special, which is really lovely to always hear and report. Moving on to Clooney's Foundation for Justice, which is something that he's set up with his wife, Amal Clooney, and he is donating nearly $2.5 million to set up 7 public schools for 3,000 Syrian refugee children, obviously who've been affected hugely, and it's to give them hope and obviously education, and obviously hopefully these children will end up being leaders, which is really, really exciting. I didn't actually know much about his foundation, but obviously giving a huge amount of money away, so all good.
Must believe in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving on to the bold new fight to eradicate suicide. Now we know that that's going on all the time. There's lots of charities working towards that, and it's this new initiative called Zero Suicide, and it's something that Steve Mallon is trying to set up. It's something that people have spoken about, I think, over 10 years ago, but he unfortunately lost his son Edward to suicide, and he was 18, and he's now trying to work towards reform and his memory on behalf of obviously his generation, and he recognised that he missed certain things with his son, small things that he gave up, like he was a great pianist and he suddenly just lost interest and things like that. Anyway, so he's working really hard to change things and work with mental health experts to. It's hard to explain, but it's rather, you don't want to leave it too late and try and help. It's to try and spot the signs. Spot the signs. So he's setting out to create a zero suicide foundation and wants to identify like a good practice that everyone can work towards. And it's a new strategy, which I thought it's a lovely story, but that's just like a small amount, just that. Moving on to Taylor Swift, everyone's talking about her great music and everything, but she has recently won a civil case against DJ David Miller. Very brave of her, I have to say. He, in a basic term, groped her bottom a few years ago, and she didn't want to make a big thing of it, but her mother did tell the radio station. It in fact sort of turned on its head, because then the DJ tried to sue her for defamation of character, but she realised that she was trying to hide it under the carpet because she didn't want it to sort of start defining her. And so she spoke up about it and decided to take him to court, not to ruin him as such, but just to show him that you can't just do this kind of thing. So for it's like $1 or something she sued him for. She won her case.
Just to make the point.
Just to make the point. But it's just really empowering for other people in that situation. Absolutely. And now she's also going on to give a huge amount to charity to help, victims. Bring people to court. Good for her. I know she's a goodie, isn't she? So I'm very pleased about that.
We've got time for a quick one.
Very simple one. A sweet photo of an elderly man feeding ice cream to his wife. I think it was just very simple, and it sort of went around the whole of. I sort of feel like I might have shared this one before. It's just about sharing the love, really, and it was just a sweet thing, and it was just so many people have been talking about it, and we should all do amazing things. Just we have to work towards not achieving, but enjoying life. Just the simple things.
Definitely,
the simple things.
Maybe our viewers can share the love and tell other people about this program.
I think
so. If you know that this show will benefit other viewers that may be feeling a bit down or they need to be inspired in some way, do let them know about us. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
See you again very soon. Thank you. Well, here on the program, we love hearing all about your mental health journeys, and here we have Jonathan Ford telling us his story.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Ford, and I'm the author of my memoir entitled Depression, Oil Trading, and a Mind at War with Itself. I think in my childhood I've shown that I did have some angry episodes. I was a very serious child. My father was an alcoholic, which obviously had a bit of a negative effect, to say the least. And my mother was very loving, but very academically interested, and made my brother and I focus very much on our school efforts, and we became somewhat perfectionists, and we tended to to not really celebrate success, but rather focus on the absence of success, if ever there was any. So I believe that led to me becoming a little bit focused on the negative of things. And my mother was also somewhat judgmental and negative and critical, and really a little bit frightened of her own shadow, for want of a better term. I entered a career in oil trading where I worked for some of the largest companies in the world for around 20 years. And obviously, as one can imagine, trading any commodity or financial instrument is very stressful. A lot of money is at stake. But I think what happened to me was, although I found the job extremely interesting and exciting and fascinating and fun and rewarding, I focused again very much on trying to be a perfectionist, which is essentially impossible in the world of trading. And for better or worse, I focused on the side of trading which is really speculative, basically trying to predict the direction of, simply speaking, the oil price up or down, which again is almost impossible to do with any great degree of consistent success, and obviously lends itself to making many decisions which are immediately judged by the market and can immediately be viewed as right or wrong. And when I made a wrong decision, I would really get down on myself. I would be incredibly self-critical, self-flagellating mentally. It would lead to me to often go home at night, and this is when I was in London or Geneva in the early days, and lie in my bed and cry perhaps, or just lock myself away and just dwell on the negativity, and I felt such a worthless failure. And these periods would be relatively frequent and consistent, maybe once every couple of months. I'd usually, though, get over them in 24 to 48 hours max, and then simply go on my way again.
Well, don't go away, because after the break we hear from resident psychologist Dr. Audrey Tang on the lasting impressions our parents' expectations can have on our long-term mental health. And we hear more from Jonathan Ford on his journey with mental illness. But first, what do Steve Jobs, Sheryl Sandberg, Elizabeth Holmes and Albert Einstein all have in common? Do you think you know the answer? See if you're correct after this break. Welcome back to the Chrissy B Show, everyone, your program for all things mental health and well-being. So before the break, I asked you, what do Steve Jobs, Sheryl Sandberg, Elizabeth Holmes or Albert Einstein all have in common? The answer? They're all firstborn children whom, according to a study reported on Elite Daily, are more likely to be high achievers than their fellow siblings, apparently. Now, our parents do shape and mold our lives for the most fundamental parts of our early development. So here to talk to us about how their expectations can help or hinder our mental health is our lovely Dr. Audrey Tang. Welcome to the show, Audrey.
Thanks for having me, Chrissy.
So again, very interesting and important topic.
Incredibly important, especially not just for parents, but for teachers, for anyone involved in childcare. All of those people, really, really important.
Now, obviously, it's important for parents to have expectations, because if they don't, it's like they don't believe in their children. So can you tell us, first of all, how expectations can actually help?
Well, the research has shown that if children have no expectations whatsoever placed on them, then they are more likely to become depressed, they're more aimless. So some expectations are important, because it is that belief in that child. Also, our parents are the ones who are going to be our main source of influence for a good 4 years or so of our lives before we start going into nursery school or starting school and so on, and meeting lots of other different influences. And so the way that our parents behave and the way that our parents treat us makes a huge difference to us. Social learning theory would suggest that we will often be influenced by the way our parents behave. So if you know that mum is, I don't know, scared of spiders or something, you're more likely to pick up that same phobia just because you've been watching and imitating, and because we look up to our parents. Parents can have wonderful expectations of young people, and for example, if you've got a family who is so into music, they're likely to have music, pianos, guitars, whatever, lying around the house, and the children are more likely to just pick it up and play something, and they're probably going to find something they enjoy doing and something they can progress. Parents are great at introducing us to their hobbies. So, I mean, my mum was a dancer. She really enjoyed dancing. So at the age of 4, I was taken to ballet school.
You guys didn't know what Audrey can dance, and one day, very soon, I'm going to get her dancing in the studio. You're going to see that.
That's quite scary. But it's because of that, my parents obviously took me into something that they understood and they enjoyed. So that's the very positive side of things. Also, it's our parents who are often there when we do fail at something or something hasn't gone right for us, and they're the ones who pick us up and instill resilience in us and make us happy and able to try again. So parents can be such positive influences when it comes to expectations.
But on the flip side, if those expectations are too high, what can happen?
Yes. I think it's summed up quite nicely by a poem by Philip Larkin. Now, for your viewers out there who know the poem, I will be replacing the inappropriate word with an appropriate word. They mess you up, your mum and dad. They do not mean to, but they do. They fill you with the faults they had and add some extra just for you. It's called This Be the Verse, and there's been a book by the same name of the original poem by Oliver James, and he talks about parental scripts. Now, what he means by that is our parents often have a bit of a game plan for us before we're born. They may already know the sex of the babies, they may already know what they want to call us, and with that they will have some kind of idea of which direction they want us to go in. And if we don't fulfill that, if we don't follow that particular pathway, it can become quite difficult for that parent and that child to begin to get on with each other, because you've almost got a very rebellious or seemingly rebellious teenager, but actually all they may be rebelling against is the pre-programmed script that the parent had of them. A great example is, say, a girl who maybe called Charlotte, which is a very girly name. It's the name of obviously our princess. And she maybe is dressed in all kinds of pretty clothes, but she's actually a tomboy and wants to be called Charlie. That can be a real problem for parents who have seen, I want to have this little girl who wears pink and plays with dolls, and that's their expectation. You've also got expectations where if the parent is into something, for example, our Formula One star Lewis Hamilton, we always hear about how his father took him go-karting and then put everything into him. And his father worked a number of jobs in order to let Lewis Hamilton drive. However, if that child knows of these sacrifices that are happening, that is a huge amount of pressure.
It is a lot of pressure,
and parents don't necessarily realise it, and they may not even realise they're telling the child that they're sacrificing so much for them. But if they are, and that child gets to internalise that, that can be a real issue, especially if suddenly they don't do well in something, or they actually feel, I don't know whether I want to do this anymore.
I'm getting flashbacks as you're talking, because it's just like just regarding my father, because everything went really well with my father until, because I hadn't, like you say, my future mapped out. I was going to study over here and then move to Cyprus, get married over there, start a family. We're all going to start a new life in Cyprus, and then that didn't happen. And as soon as I decided to stay here and just live the life that I wanted, that's when it all went wrong. So and like it was a pressure, because like, oh my God, my dad's just sort of invested all this time in our education and money and given up his dreams, and then I changed my mind, because up until that time I'd wanted to do everything that he'd said, but then I got older, I changed.
Absolutely. And that is what happens. Children grow up, they begin to find interests of their own that the parent hadn't introduced them to. They meet new people who are not necessarily going to be bad influences. They can be wonderful influences, and that child is drawn towards that particular ambition or that particular career. And that can be quite difficult for a parent to understand, especially if not only have they invested so much in that child, but they've had those dreams and hopes for that child to go on and do something that they want them to do. You've also got expectations, as you mentioned earlier when you came back from break, about the firstborn child. And there can be a problem for younger siblings if they're expected to live up to certain successes, or to be just like the older brother or sister.
My sister, older sister. It's a show about me. I wasn't expecting this today.
Well, this is what happens when you talk about parental expectations. All of this comes out, and you start reflecting on it. My husband was always very good at academically, so very good at maths, very good at sciences, that sort of thing. His brother was really good at sports, and it was very difficult for teachers to understand that his brother was just not so interested in the academic side of things. He is very academic, he's very bright, but he really excels. He ran for the county, he's done so much sort of positive stuff in the sports field, but he just wasn't sitting there acing all his maths tests.
That's it.
And that can be a real issue as well. Similarly, poor expectations can be put down as well. So you can have a family who the child isn't doing well, and then the younger one comes into school and teachers all sit there and go, oh, well, you know, it's that family. And that's awful. You've got to treat each child as an individual and give them a fair chance.
Well, actually, Audrey, that's something that we're going to go into a bit later on, is on how to have realistic expectations that actually help your children rather than make them feel really badly. And before that, we're actually going to head back to Jonathan to hear more of his story.
Now, in 1990, I moved to the States, and since then, I've looked back in hindsight and said that my depression to non-depressed ratio switched completely, and it was more like 80% depressed, which is obviously very serious and troublesome. Again, the trading was very stressful. I would focus very much on the negativity of my failings. Foolishly, I tended to focus on the speculative side of the business, which is absolutely not necessary, and many people are extremely successful without putting themselves under the stress of that type of speculation. But for whatever reason, I think I wanted to prove that I could do something which was almost impossible to do, and which was incredibly unsuited to my personality, which was one of great self-criticism, negative thinking, and desire for perfection, because I tend to think that in my childhood I was always expected to be largely academically perfect. I do recall in 1996 I had one of my best years ever trading, and yet during that year I would go home at night and lie in my bed and literally cry for maybe an hour, write in my diary about how I hated my life, how I was trapped in a prison, how I just wanted it all to end, how there was never any way out, and it was absolutely devastating. And also at that time I had 2 young children, and it wasn't a very good condition mentally to be in, given that I did have the 2 young children to look after along with my wife. In around 2000, I got remarried in 2003. I had much more clearly defined expectations of this marriage, but once again I found myself a victim of circumstance, getting involved in a life that I had no way anticipated and saw, and my life just went down avenues that I in no way expected them to go, and it was just an incredibly stressful, unhappy period, and I was overwhelmed much of the time with depression. I was still trading. I'd had some bad luck. I'd had some bad luck in my work life, and then I had all this enormous financial pressure, being married again with young children. I had two more children, and it was just a pressure cooker of extreme magnitude, and I just struggled enormously. And there were periods when, in 2003, I remember I was having a tough time at work, and I just felt the financial obligation so huge that I was found once by my wife literally naked on the sofa, banging my pillow and bashing my fists into the pillow and crying inconsolably. And I was very, very depressed periodically, always on antidepressants. And really my worst periods were probably in the last 4 years, from like 2012 to 2016, when, for better or worse, I was investing my own money quite aggressively into the stock market. And I didn't really want to be doing this. Again, I couldn't understand how my life had come to this. I knew the effects this type of work had on me, and yet I was doing it, and I was doing it quite successfully, but I could never seem to make enough, because my wife did have a habit of spending massive amounts of money on God knows what, I truly don't know. And under this enormous stress through 2013 and 2014, there'd be times when I would say to her I really felt suicidal, my life was no longer worth living, I wanted to end it all. But obviously I didn't really want to leave my children stranded, but I felt they'd be better off without me. Plus they'd get the life insurance and whatever money I had left. But I would usually get like this once I'd taken a big financial setback, which at that time tended slowly to come back. And yet towards the end of 2014, I had a sense of impending doom. I was struggling massively. Again, I'd been stuck in a life that I just couldn't recognize and had no desire to be in. And yet there was no way to get out. In my mind, I just simply couldn't see any way whatsoever of getting out. And I proceeded almost expectedly to lose about a third of what I was investing. This sent me into a major emotional breakdown, effectively, and I was hospitalized for a few days in Austin, Texas. And during that time, I realized that obviously this life was just destroying me, and I was effectively destroyed. But when I came out, I couldn't stomach the loss of the 1/3 of my capital reserves, because I saw no way that we could survive, because my wife had made it quite clear she didn't want to cut back on her spending, and I felt completely and utterly trapped. And so I hoped and prayed and tried to make the money back, but sadly and somewhat unluckily, over the next 10 months, the remaining 2/3 just drifted away, and it was a complete disaster. And by the end of that time, I was obviously utterly in despair. I was firmly thinking about ending it all. I knew that I didn't really want to leave my children in the lurch and to upset them, and I'm very cognizant of that, and I think that's the main reason I'm still here, because I don't want to upset my children. But I really came to a sense of peace with the idea of ending it all. But I didn't do that, and it was at this point I decided to write my life story. And I was truly and utterly devastated as I wrote that book. My wife read it and decided she wanted to divorce me, which further devastated me, because even though I don't think we had the best relationship at all, I just couldn't contemplate yet more change. And over the next year, I was absolutely pretty much out of it. I could hardly function at all. I could hardly look after my children. I could hardly get up, and it was just, I really functioned in a very poor level. We moved to a different part of Texas, which I found extraordinarily stressful, and I was just utterly desperate and wanting to get out, and I could think of very little other than ending my life. And almost for days, for months and months and months, I was just consumed by ever-present suicidal ideation. Yet I didn't act upon it for reasons I've stated, and also for reasons that I didn't want, because we weren't yet divorced, and I didn't want what remaining money I had to go to my wife. I wanted to get the divorce done so I could leave it to the children. I wanted to get my life insurance sorted out so I could leave it to the children. And the divorce dragged on, so it meant I couldn't do anything in my mind. But during the end months of 2016, I struggled again to function. I hardly saw anybody or talked to anybody. I could barely entertain my children, who obviously I'm very close to. I couldn't actually have them over at my house because I just couldn't handle that. But I spent a lot of time during the day going to see them at school and at home, and just trying so hard to get out and interact with them. And it was completely and utterly desperate.
Well, after the break, we'll be hearing more from Audrey on how to provide support and give your children realistic and healthy expectations. But first, what quality is the most important thing parents want their children to learn? Is it A, diligence, B, empathy, or C, responsibility? If you think you know the answer, stay tuned and see if you're right after this break. Hi, I'm Chrissy B, and my show is all about improving your mental health and being happy. Join me every Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 10 p.m. on my channel Sky 203. Visit chrissybshow.tv for more information and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Chrissy B Show. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Chrissy B Show, and on our Facebook page, The Chrissy B Show. Welcome back to the Chrissy B Show, everyone. Now, before the break, I asked you what quality is the most important that parents want their children to learn. Is it A, diligence, B, empathy, or C, responsibility? The answer is C. When 3,000 adults were asked in a study by Pew Research about the relative importance of the 12 values kids need to learn, a full 93% said teaching children to be responsible is especially important, and 55% rated it as one of their top 3. So with that in mind, let's talk to Dr. Audrey Tang again on what parents can do to ease their expectations of their children. So welcome back again, Audrey.
Thank you.
So, difficult thing to do, and parenting is very difficult. I'm not a parent myself, but I hear it's very hard. So how can you set realistic expectations that are not going to be overbearing and put too much pressure, but at the same time encourage your children to do well?
I'm really glad you started this section with values, with that particular question, because actually expecting values of the child is one of the most important things. Expecting responsibility, expecting compassion, expecting integrity. Those are some of the things that can teach that child to grow up to be happy and fulfilled in anything that they have chosen for themselves. And teaching them resilience, teaching them to get up again when they've been knocked back, that will get them through life and get them through life successfully. It may not be successfully in terms of the accolades and the stardom that maybe your script had in mind for them, but they will be fulfilled human beings. So teaching values or expecting values is one of the best things that you can do. Another thing is to bear in mind that children love to please you. They want to be praised. They want to be told they've done a good job, and they may be doing whatever it is you've asked them to do purely because because it's making you so happy doing it.
Yeah.
And that can become a problem later on if they start thinking, actually, I don't want to do this anymore. One probably good example is often musical instruments. If a parent plays a musical instrument, the child picks up the same musical instrument, and after a while it gets to the point where the child doesn't want to play that anymore, or doesn't want to do that particular thing anymore. But because the parent is so happy with them doing it, they don't necessarily want to stop it. But we've also got to bear in mind that sometimes when it comes to musical instruments, dancing, all those creative things, or in fact anything a child wants to become really good at, there will come a point where it will get hard. And we need to just be mindful that a child wanting to give something up is not just because it's got hard, and it is because they really don't want to do it anymore.
Okay.
So you've got to just
so interesting.
Watch the child, and listen to them, and really think about what they're really saying to you.
I'm getting flashbacks again, Audrey. I have to share something here. No, just because it goes back to, again, my father, because he kind of wanted boys, and then he ended up with 2 girls. But he used to take us to the farm with him, but we used to go shooting. So I knew how to use a shotgun at quite a young age, and we used to but the thing is, I actually really liked animals, and I didn't actually like shooting. I mean, I used to eat the game, obviously, we used to shoot rabbits and wood pigeon and all that. And I used to enjoy the food, but the actual act of going out and shooting, I didn't actually enjoy. But I mean, he thought I did. But what I enjoyed was being in his company and keep talking and all that stuff. But the actual shooting itself, I didn't like, because I really felt sorry for the animals. And there were other things that I did that I'm not going to mention here. When we used to go shooting and stuff. But it was like, I can see where children, and it's not even the parent's fault, because that parent might think, okay, well, she enjoys it. She likes coming and shooting birds and animals and stuff like that. But in actual fact, it's just you're doing that to please the parent.
And to spend time with them.
And to spend time with them,
That's the key thing. And that is something that parents just look out for. Just be aware that if your child is doing something that maybe you feel their heart's not quite in it, they may just be doing it because
maybe to ask them, actually, do you enjoy this? If you like, or we can do something else.
Absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't hurt to ask. Another thing that's important to remember is, again, with scripts. If you are wanting a child to do something that you're not introducing them into a world that maybe they're not ready for, I mention this just because there's a lot of these rumours that circulate around Hollywood about all kinds of behaviours of certain high up people that are wholly inappropriate for young people coming into the world of acting. And sometimes when parents are so maybe wanting their child to become stars because they notice the talent in the child, it might be that they end up putting that child in a position where that child isn't quite ready to be able to cope with what's being asked of them, or isn't able to say, I don't like this, or I don't think that's appropriate. I'm not saying it's necessarily going down the abuse side of things, not always, but it can, which is horrible to think about. But there can be things where if a child is being coerced into doing something, but it's going to be for the television show, or it's going to be for this or that. You've got to be mindful as a parent that they are a child, and they're not growing older before their time. So again, if you are supporting that child, look out for the world that you're bringing them into as well. As I said about siblings, just watch out for that, that support. Make sure that a child, if they're good at something, don't make them become performers for your sake either. A very common thing that happens, child who's really good at singing, it's a party, sing for grandma. It's a party, sing for
This is so funny. Sorry. I'm not going to talk about it in my flashbacks anymore. That's it now. Go on.
But that is what happens. And then that behaviour can put the child off. You get this with high-functioning children. So often on the Asperger's autistic spectrum, where they're very good at doing something and like doing it for the sake of doing it, which is the best intrinsic motivation you can possibly have. But because the parents see that they're good at it, and of course you want to be proud of your children, they're always being told to show how you can skateboard, show you how you can do you can trampoline, or whatever it is that child can do. And certainly if they're on the spectrum, they don't enjoy that sort of attention. But even if they're not, that kind of need to perform can really put you off wanting to do it.
It's not natural, it doesn't come naturally, because now you're on the spot.
Exactly. And that can actually stop a child doing what they love doing, purely because they're thinking, right, I'm not going to perform for you anymore, I'm not going to do that anymore. And they may only come back to it much, much later, when they're sure that they aren't going to be told, show off for grandparents. And that can actually be quite late in the day for them to come back to it, because of course it's much easier to learn things when we're younger. So there's a number of things to look out for, and this is not just parents, it is educators as well. It's anyone that has an influence on a child's life at that young age. So not just parents, it's very important for other people to recognise.
Now, of course, sometimes children, just before we go, Audrey, sometimes children can be quite quiet and not really express themselves, though, because sometimes it's difficult for parents to know, or teachers or whoever, to know what that child is actually feeling. So maybe just, what's your tip on how to kind of get them to talk and actually say what they're feeling about things?
It's maybe finding a way of letting that child express themselves. So if you notice that a child is drawing a lot, or they are making up poems or something that you weren't telling them to do, then maybe talk to their parent. If you've noticed that as a teacher, talk to their parent about it. One thing to maybe think about, and this is not an exact science, but I find it quite a useful metaphor, is something called the 5 languages of love. We express ourselves in different ways. Some people express ourselves through words of affection. Some people express ourselves through doing things. Some people express ourselves through giving gifts. So there's 5 in particular that have been brought out. But it's wise to just remember that people will express themselves differently. Just because a child isn't jumping around going, I love doing this, I love doing this, doesn't mean they don't love doing it. It's just that they don't feel comfortable behaving in that particular way. And the sad part is we are often drawn towards the bubbly, enthusiastic child, and we often leave the quieter one getting on with it on their own. But it might well be the quiet one who's really into whatever it is they're doing, and just the odd, noticing them, acknowledging them, the odd nod of support can go a long way for that child.
Brilliant. I was the quiet one, by the way. But I did get lots of encouragement. I can't say I didn't, because I really did. Audrey, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you again next week. Thank you. All right, guys, so now let's take a look at this last part of Jonathan Ford's story.
Somewhat miraculously, towards the beginning of this year, after talking to a number of friends, and thankfully I have a number of friends, and contemplating things and meeting 1 or 2 other new people, I began to feel somewhat better, which sort of was very strange and almost frightening. In the past, I've always been afraid that if I feel better, there's something really bad coming down the pike. And I did actually, or have really for the last 6 months, felt better. I've tried to put distance between myself and what happened in the past, such that it's almost a different person. It's no longer me. It's obviously a different person I am now. I don't know what the future holds. I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I have a few modest plans. And thankfully for the last 6 months, I have felt better. I have been still on antidepressants, but I'm still a little cautious and wondering if this will last, but hopefully it will. The actual writing of the book was an interesting process. It really sort of burst out of me. It was something I felt I had to do because I felt I had so much to say. I feel almost for me the most serious contributor to my depression has been the circumstances. I think the culture in America is very unsuited to me. I didn't understand the type of women, to be honest, that I was meeting and what their desires in life were. I find society is so obsessed with money and the need to make money and almost the need to spend money. Everything is sort of structured, whether it's healthcare or education, to sort of maximize expenditure for minimum of benefit, and I find that very difficult. There's a homogeneity of thinking which is difficult to compete with at times, almost like the tyranny of the masses, as I think de Tocqueville would call it. And I was stuck in a life, with 2 families that was very much sort of the archetype of that paradigm, as it were. And I really, really, really struggled monumentally because it wasn't me, it never was me. I hid those facts from the people closest to me. And ultimately it pretty much destroyed me and almost led to my premature demise. If you have situations in life that require tough decisions, get some advice from very close friends or confidants, and always do what feels right to yourself. Never do what doesn't feel right. Every one of the bad decisions I made, and there were maybe 4 or 5 extremely bad ones, I effectively knew they were the wrong thing to do, but I did them anyway. Even on at least 3 or 4 occasions, I initially said, no way, I'm not doing that, but after receiving some pressure, I relented. And so absolutely don't do that. Be true to your self, be true to your own inner voice, be true to what you want to do, and think about what you want from life and not what anybody else wants. And that doesn't mean to say you're being selfish, it just means you're looking after yourself, and it's the way to look after yourself is the first step towards helping other people too. So be very, very true to yourself. Be very careful of what you're getting into. Look for red flags. If there are red flags in relationships, pay heed to them. I overlooked them all. But pay heed, those red flags aren't going to go away. They will get worse in time. Learn from my mistakes. I think Voltaire said, is anybody so intelligent as to learn from the mistakes of others? And hopefully they can learn from my mistakes and not repeat them. Thank you very much. Again, this is Jonathan Ford, the author of Depression, Oil Trading, and a Mind at War with Itself. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much to Jonathan for sharing his story. And if you have a story that you would like to share on the program, we'd love to hear from you. Do email us on info@chrissybshow.tv. So let me tell you what's coming up after the break. We'll be teaching you how to make a powerhouse salad that is sure to feed the fussy eaters in your lives. And I'll be giving you my top tips on how you can move past your parents' expectations. But first, as we found out, parents with unattainable expectations can lead to children who are perfectionists. But what's a key sign of perfectionism in children? Is it A, leaving work unfinished out of fear it won't be good enough? B, focusing on mistakes rather than on what they did well? Or C, having trouble accepting criticism? Find out the correct answer after this break. Welcome back to the Chrissy B Show, everyone, where today we've been talking all about our parents and their expectations. Now, before the break, I asked you, what's a key sign of perfectionism in children? Is it A, leaving work unfinished out of fear it won't be good enough? B, focusing on mistakes rather than on what they did well? Or C, having trouble accepting criticism? The answer? Well, it was a bit of a trick one because it's all three of them. Perfectionism can rob a child of their natural desire to experience things, and these were just a few of the behaviors that show how perfectionism creates a loss of this natural inner drive and motivation to learn. Now, expectations are hard not to push onto other people, and that can be expectations of all kinds, including children and food. So with unhealthy processed foods and snacks full of sugar, even more accessible than ever before, it can be tough to get your children to eat healthily. So how do we get our fussy eaters, young and old, to eat nutritious and body-happy food? Well, one of the best ways is to cook with them, and what better way to start than with a yummy salad recipe by Salad Pride.
Hi everyone, I'm Chef Danielle Shine, and I am so incredibly excited because we are at one of my favourite places in the heart of London called Salad Pride. If you haven't visited, make sure you do. I'm here with the David Bez, founder and owner and cookbook author. I'm a little in awe. Thank you so much, David, for having us today.
Thank you very much for coming.
I'm so excited because David is the creator of some amazingly beautiful salads, and he's going to teach you and me how to make one right now. What are we going to make?
We're going to make a pasta. Oh, sorry. No, we're not going to make a pasta. We're going to make a salad with courgettes.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So no pasta. Okay.
But we're going to make a sort of a pasta.
Okay.
So it's going to be a carbonara style pasta.
Like a plant-based kind of pasta.
Exactly,
Okay.
but with no carbs.
Excellent.
And
Tick.
no meat.
Tick.
And no dairy.
Tick.
But with a lot of veggies. So we do start with our courgettes, which has been spiralized.
Okay.
Although if you don't have a spiralizer, I have a simple technique
Okay.
to show you
Ooh.
how to make something that is very similar. So you take a potato peeler and your zucchini, and
Okay.
what you could do is a sort of a little ribbon.
Oh my goodness.
So this will do pretty much the same job.
That is so beautiful
but
too.
even better. On top of that, what we're gonna do, we're gonna place some proteins. So here we have lentils, these ones are black beluga lentils.
Ooh.
But any kind of brown lentils will do the job. So second, we're gonna put something sweet. So it's
Okay.
a sweet potato. Roasted with a little bit of oil and a little bit of salt. So I was thinking, how do you get the bacony flavor? And there's two ingredients that I think they kind of
Okay.
merge together to give that. One is tamari soy sauce,
Okay, now that's soy sauce without the gluten.
and then smoked paprika. With these two together, you put it on top with a little bit of olive oil, and you put your red onions in this case. And you
That's
put it in
amazing.
the oven at 180 degrees for a good half an hour.
Yeah.
then they come out and they smell like heaven.
I'm not kidding, but that actually smells like bacon.
So what makes the carbonara is the sauce,
But doesn't the sauce have egg in it?
and also Parmesan cheese.
So how do you get around that?
So I've created a little cashew dressing.
Okay.
So you mix together a bit lemon, a bit of water,
Yes.
a bit of cashews,
Cashew nuts, yeah.
nutritional yeast,
I love nutritional yeast,
a
yes.
little bit of garlic,
Okay.
and a little bit of salt.
Wow.
And then you blend everything together. But then you want a little bit of crunch, right?
You do.
I've toasted in the oven some sunflower seeds with a little bit of paprika and a little bit of oil and a little bit of orange zest. So these are sort of a mix between a sprout and an herb because they are cresses.
Ah, okay. So that's it.
That's it. Yep.
So I'm going to bring out a fork for me and
Thank you
you.
very much.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. I am really excited to taste this. That is amazing.
Thank you.
I mean, the ingredients are so basic, but the taste of that is so delicious, and I can taste bacon.
It does,
It's
isn't
blowing
it?
my mind. I can taste bacon and I'm eating onion. Thankfully, David has shared the recipe with us. Thank you so much. It's now on the Chrissy Bee website, so head there to make this, drool and enjoy. Thanks for watching and see you again soon.
Thank you very much to Salad Pride. So now it's time for my tips on how to live past your parents' expectations. So my first point is to hear your parents out. Now, we do have to kind of cut our parents some slack because they may have a point about something. So they've probably made a lot of mistakes and they don't want you to make those same mistakes. So even though sometimes parents can kind of go on about things and you get annoyed and you get angry with them, especially if you're young or in your teenage years, it's kind of difficult and you just want to, you think that they don't understand you and you've got all these kind of ideas about your parents that, they're just being horrible and all this kind of stuff, but give them a chance to explain and actually hear them out because they have, lived longer than you, obviously. They have a wisdom that you haven't got attained yet. So hear what they have to say and actually weigh up whether actually what they're saying makes sense. I should actually listen to them and take on board their advice. So these tips aren't going to be about parent bashing in any way, shape or form, but it's just to try to get you to communicate better with your parents. My second point is, it kind of follows on, which is to understand your parents. Now, my father was very strict. At the time when I was in my teenage years, I really had a problem with this because, I wanted to go out, wanted to do so many things, and I had so many plans of my own. But as I got older and when I look back, I actually understood why he was so strict. First of all, he wanted to really look after my sister and me. And, there were dangers out there that he wanted to protect us from. But also he was strict with us academically as well. And that was partly because he came from quite a poor background. They didn't have much in life. Even food-wise, they were quite restricted. And he came to the UK when I think he was about 16 with just very little money in his pocket, and he actually had to start everything from scratch. So he went through a lot and he didn't want us to go through the same thing. So if your parents are strict, instead of just kind of rebelling and arguing with them, why not just sit down and have a conversation and actually find out about their background? If they haven't told you already, what was life like for them growing up? What kind of things did they go through? How was their relationship with their parents? If you try and understand your parents a bit better, then it will actually help in understanding some of the things that you might think that they're forcing on you, but you'll get to understand why. The next point is value the lessons and get rid of the rest. So again, going back to my father, my dad was a perfectionist and it was very hard at home sometimes, and there was actually constant pressure to study, but it wasn't just only the academic stuff. Even everything in our house had to be looked after really well. So just to give you an example, if I was to be hoovering and then I dragged the hoover by the actual nozzle to move the hoover, I would get into really bad trouble because it was like I could cause damage to the hoover, and for me it was like constant nagging. and also later on in life, I became a perfectionist. I still am to a certain extent. And in many ways, it did affect me in a negative way. And even the way I dealt with people, the way I would deal with my team, even up to a few years ago, the way I would put pressure on people to get work done. And it was only when I sort of kind of analysed my upbringing and how my father was with me that I actually realised, well, you know, I've become a perfectionist. I'm expecting other people to work the same way I do and keep up the way I do. And it wasn't good, and it did get me into trouble, and it did affect my working relationship with people. But then obviously I took that on board. I changed the way I worked and everything. And again, going back to things even in the house, so with that kind of perfection that led to the negative things, I had to change that and let go of that. But there were the other parts where, for example, where perfections can be good, again, things in the house. So I've now learned to look after things properly. Like, there's very rare that something in my house will break or will not be looked after, because I know how to look after things because of the way my father was with me. So again, I've taken the valuable lessons, I've taken on board what I can learn to improve myself, and the rest where it was too much, too overbearing, I've let go of. And I think that's what you have to do, because your parents aren't perfect. They're not perfect. They will never be perfect. They've made their mistakes, but there are things that you can learn from them. There's many things that you can take on board and change and do positive things with how they've treated you or how they've been with you at home. The fourth point is find a way. So say, for example, you've taken the lessons from your parents, you've let go of things that maybe aren't so good for you, and you actually really want to do something with your life. There's something in particular that you want to study, for example, or you really want to go down a certain career path. Maybe you live with your parents, and that decision you can't just make that decision and just follow it through. You have to get permission from your parents or the approval of your parents. If they really dig their heels in and you absolutely can't do what you want at that particular moment, then find a way. That this particular situation, there needs to be some kind of sacrifice. So okay, you might be studying something that you don't particularly want to be doing, but why don't you study on the side or do some research, do some course on the side of what you're already doing in the thing that you really want to do? So at least it's not like you're wasting your time doing something you're not enjoying. You are doing something that you love and something that you're interested in alongside of the other stuff as well. And sometimes if that's the only way that you can do it for now, that's how it's going to have to be. What's the alternative? Just arguing with your parents all the time. So I know it's hard to kind of swallow that sometimes, but it's not going to be a waste. What you're doing that your parents want you to do isn't going to be a complete waste, because you are learning skills which are transferable to other things. So it's just a kind of compromise, and just, if you really want to do something, find a way to do it. And finally, number 5, stand up for yourself. So when you've actually reached the age where your parents, can't make certain decisions for you, where they can't influence you, then it's actually time to stand up for yourself. So your parents can't be telling you what to do all the time. There has to be a moment when you're grown up, and you just have to say to them, sorry, I love you, I respect what you're saying to me, but this is what I'm going to do. This is the decision that I'm making for myself. This is what I love to do, and I'm going to go for it. And if you do make this decision and you speak to your parents in this way, make sure that you actually make it and you're successful. Not to kind of prove them wrong and say, look, you didn't believe me. Not that kind of, in a way, to prove to them that they were wrong. But just for yourself. Make sure that you do something for yourself, and don't expect congratulations from anyone or well done. Just do it for yourself. Be your own cheerleader. And even if they don't say it, they will be very proud of you. Well, everyone, we have reached the end of today's program, but if you have a comment that you would like to share, or you'd like to be a guest on this program, please do get in touch with us. You can email us on info@chrissybshow.tv. You can also tweet us @ChrissyBShow, or leave a message on our Facebook page, The Chrissy B Show. And if you'd like to know more about me and how I overcame different mental health problems, you can visit my personal website, which is mylifeafterdepression.com. Until next time, bye-bye for now. You can email us on info@chrissybshow.tv. You can also tweet us @ChrissyBShow. It's all right. It's okay. It's all right. It was hard. I don't know whether to carry on or not. We heard that inside, right? Well, everyone, we have reached the end of today's program. But if you have a story that you would like to share, or you have a comment to share, to me, share. Perfection isn't possible. Strive for excellent. Dragon's G's quotes Mark David Oh! Why? I don't want to do anymore. What do Steve Jobs, Sheryl Sandberg, Elizabeth Holmes, or Albert Einstein all have? Einstein.